everyone, I'm Alexa Lavoie with Rebel News, and today we are tackling a topic that's stirring debate once more in Quebec: the real prospect of another sovereignty referendum. The Parti Québécois is leading in the polls, heading to the next provincial election, keeping the independence question alive in many minds. Yet, support for actually voting yes to sovereignty remains low. Recent surveys show it dipping as low as 30%, with clear majorities still firmly opposed. What makes this conversation especially compelling? We are examining the growing Alberta independence movement through a pure Quebec lens, and doing it with a guest who is a committed Quebec sovereigntist, but one who rejects the current path being pushed by the Parti Québécois. Joining me is Aubé, podcaster and sharp voice on the Yanni Frank podcast, delivering straight-shooting takes on politics and economics. Now, let's listen what he has to say. So, Joey, you are an outspoken conservative, and you defend your ideas, notably through the podcast Yanni Frank. How do you see the upcoming election, especially with two new party leaders who seems to turn into a center-right?
Yeah, center-right is pretty much the new virtue signaling buzzword, politically speaking, in Quebec these last few months. Which doesn't mean anything anymore. It's no longer like a political specification, so to speak. It's like racism or phobia of any kind or racist. It's become part of this category. Pretty much now, the only qualification for being center-right is being anything but Québec solidaire, which is the really left-leaning political party here in Quebec. For the next election, provincial election in Quebec, I'll say everything is possible at this point, and that's what's actually both funny and at the same time exciting about it, because we always say politics is a two-edged blade. You have the negative and the positive, but right now everything is possible. We know that Charles Milliard is going to be crowned leader of the PLQ because Mario Roy, the other candidate, doesn't seem to finish his debt from the last campaign, so he probably won't be able to run even if he really, really, really wants to. He's almost begging to do it, actually. It's kind of depressing. On the Parti Québécois, we have Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, which is well implemented, is technically the oldest leader so far in terms of mandate inside his own party, so that's going to be him. Éric Duhem with the Quebec Conservative Party is going to be there. Obviously, he's going to change. We're not going to change leadership before the election. As part for the CAQ, the Coalition Avenir Québec, the living government, it will depend. We have Christine Fréchette and Bernard Drainville, and I say from both perspectives, we have two different visions, I think. Even as Monsieur Drainville has pretty much copy-paste the entire program from the PCQ the last weekend, even though he's always been like an outspoken social democrat, left-leaning Quebec politician. Now he's supposedly center-right and does a huge critic of the Modèle Québécois, of the Providence states and the nanny states of Quebec. He wants to challenge the high instances of the unions. He wants to get more private in healthcare. He wants to also get maybe more private sector and more private collaboration within public school system and stuff like that. I hope not a lot of people believe him, since I prefer someone who's always had those ideas from the beginning. It's always been part of their true conviction, instead of someone who just changed the ideas because you understand which way the wind turned and the wind is blowing. So yeah, we'll see. And from Christine Fréchette's perspective, she's definitely, from the outspoken conservative commentators, she's most certainly the establishment candidate. Martin Koskinen, the former chef de cabinet secretary of Premier François Legault, he has his full support, and so far she has more NPs to her side than Bernard Drainville. Of course, the members will have to vote, so we'll see. She seems to be a more corporatist, beige, gray, establishment candidate. I'm not against, I'm not in favor, I'm in between, what I'm saying. And Bernard Drinville seems to have more an approach of a center-right approach with maybe like a touch of Quebec-like nationalism from his PQ past. So we'll see.
But one of my questions is, how do you explain the fact that the PQ is mainly leading in the polls? Their first promise is to lead a referendum on Quebec sovereignty. But when we look at the poll for a potential referendum and the appetite of the people is as low as, what, 30%? How do you explain that?
I mean, for almost 3 years now, the PQ has been like kind of a vote refuge for many Quebec electors, mainly like a parking spot because of the really down in the polls in the CAQ. Like the appreciation of the Legault government has been a down spiral since the end of the pandemic. You went from the most liked provincial premier in the country to almost the lowest ones right now. And it seems to be much of a grudge, like anti-Legault vote. So they looked at the other parties. And since the Quebec Liberal Party has been mostly reduced to Montreal-centric English community party with almost no vote and almost no circumscription from the Francophone vote, the electorate went from the CAQ in 2018 and in 2022 now goes back to their whole habits, which is the blue against the red. So it's the Parti Québécois, which has a very charismatic leader and a talented one. I won't say the otherwise for Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. But at the same time, I think the Quebec people, Quebec electorate, a part of it at least, doesn't truly understand what a vote for the PQ is. Their main logic is, yeah, we'll vote for him to get rid of Legault and govern Quebec, but if he pulls up his referendum on sovereignty, we'll just vote against it. Yes, but you could do that, but at the same time, there's consequences by saying no a third time. Like in 1980, we got the Constitution in Canada brought back from England, and Pierre Trudeau, Justin's father, signed it without Quebec's signature. In 1995, after the loss, almost the win of Quebec in 1995, we got the law for referendum clarity, and Quebec lost a lot of power in these following years, and it's been like, even culturally, like inside the people, there's been like a scar that never truly healed for us after that time, and now it's like opening the scars all over again, opening the wound and let it fester for another time, just for old time's sake. And to be fair, I'm not against the idea of independence as principle. I'm consider myself one of the right-wing person economically. I think the ultimate expression of freedom, of liberty, which is my principal value, is the emancipation of one's people to independence, pretty much. But right now, especially since the CAQ government came along, we have a deficit of almost like 14 billion in debt. The cost of life, especially not only in Quebec, but also across Canada, the housing market has been a total nightmare for young people from my age and from the younger generation to actually afford a home. And there's like a generational clash between two generations. The baby boomers, mostly 60 years plus, and I'm not saying every one of the baby boomers, like mostly, if you see the statistics, but most of them seem to have a great time. They don't think, like, contrary to what, for example, Pierre Poilievre said, that Canada is broken. Because, of course, their house value has increased like 4, 5, 6 to 7 times in the last couple of years. But the down effect from this is, of course, the young people can no longer afford a home. So now there's young people who want a more conservative leaning government, more fiscally responsible, and the baby boomers want more security, want more laws, want more restrictions. They are afraid of Trump. Fear has engulfed them in many cases. That's why they elected Mark Carney and gave the Liberals in Ottawa a 5th mandate consecutively. So, yeah, we'll see. And pretty much for the next election, I'll say everything is possible, including referendum. But at the same time, yeah, they need to think twice before even voting for the PQ.
Because you say it yourself, you are the kind of person that you will want Quebec to be a country, but you're not adhering to the vision of the PQ at this moment.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not the only one. There's other or sovereignists or independentists at heart that the approach of the referendum has never been has always been the only possibility. Some of them will just make a like an independence declaration and wait for the backing up from France and other countries, something like that. Some will mean a total vote. Some want other methods, and also because the quote-unquote coalition that the Parti Québécois says he wants to create doesn't seem to be quite a coalition, pretty much. Of course, there's been a lot more engouement. I don't know what's the word in English. There's been like some kind of trend to be, of course, the independence seems to be more, I mean, from the media's perspective, it seems to be more on the rise, but from the statistic, it doesn't move. Like, there's not like a huge amount, maybe like a slight increase in young people's vote in favor of sovereignty, but at the same time, we don't see it quite enough in the perspective. And from the Parti Québécois perspective, in terms of coalition, they say like they want to unite people from the right, people from the left, people at the center, to unite to get for the only one goal, which is independence. But so far, even them, they were the first to start this I'm center-right kind of mentality with Alex Boissonneau, which was their candidate in the by-election of Arthabasca-l'Érable, which was a former far-left activist who went to the Sommet des Amériques in almost 20 years ago and got arrested. He didn't kill anybody, but he passed some time in prison, at least in detention, and was complotting to pretty much like breach the perimeter in that conference and maybe like protest and attack some people. Of course, that didn't happen, and we're pretty glad for that. But at the same time, he said he's changed. He said he's now center-right, but every time you heard him speak, he's always have this kind of left-leaning tangent about him. He's quoting like from the Iris, which is like a left-wing economic think tank from Montreal. He's been like, there's like several like media posts for many years from like 7 to 10 years ago, was apparently making his change from far left to center, which was like defending the Hugo Chavez government in Venezuela. He was praising Fidel Castro when he died. So there's a lot of question to understand if someone is center left or center right or whatever. There's a political compass for it. But for now, we just need to take their words at face value and don't ask any questions. And that's a real problem. And for now, and so far, because for those who don't know, there's been several by-election, like a record number in the last couple of years in Quebec. There's been in Terrebonne. There's now right now in Chicoutimi. There's been one, I said, in Arthabasca. There's been one in Jean Talon in Quebec City. And almost all the candidate that the Parti Québécois put it there for their election, and they won all of them so far, has been mostly social democrat left-wing people. Mostly, maybe they're more right. It's like in France with the Rassemblement National. Maybe they're more right-leaning in terms of social policies, more on the nationalistic side, perhaps. And I will not think otherwise. But globally speaking, there's classic PQ, social democrat, left-leaning, like Quebec interventionist people. So in terms of coalition of truly right-wing or economically right-wing people, I'm still waiting to see.
And it's not because you're critics about immigration that make you automatically a right-wing or center-right.
Yeah, for some media it is. For some media, whatever, you can be left-wing for all the other subjects, socially, economically, and everything. But if you criticize immigration numbers, or if you say, for example, systemic racism doesn't exist, then you're automatically right-wing, which is preposterous to me. So Quebec, when Quebec wants to push for independence, generally it's accepted and normalized. But what we are seeing with Alberta, now we are seeing people labeling them as extremists and far rights. And some of them are saying that there is some foreign money being involved or foreign help. Why we are seeing such a double standard there? I mean, you know better than me, Alexa. That's the Freedom Convoy method right there. Like when they came in, they called them extremists. They called them conspiracy theorists. They talk about like aid from the United States, aid from Russia, and foreign sources and everything. And they thought they brought weapons and stuff like that. And that's the same method that's been happening all over again. And I think they're launching they're pointing all their artilleries to the separatist movement in Alberta, because contrary to Quebec, even though it will be a great loss, the money is in Alberta. Alberta is the money machine of the country. If Alberta leaves, Canada is pretty much done. From Alberta's perspective, first of all, you seem to be more it seems to be more easy from your part because you have money in your pockets. And you have like a huge leverage in that term, and also you want to do it mostly for economic reason and freedom of enterprise, freedom of expression, protect your laws and your way of life. And Quebec is the same thing, but it's more of a cultural reason, because of the perequation and the payments received from the other provinces. We've always been kind of a low. We have resources. We have the potential. I think my people have a great potential to become one of the richest countries in North America. But at the same time, right now we've been beggars for many, many years from the other provinces to give us extra money from the federal government and from the other provinces as well. So for us, it's more of a cultural issue in terms of our own language, our own unique culture that we want to protect, and we want to pretty much keep safe, and that's totally fine. I totally agree with that. But at the same time, people don't. Most people, because since the earlier debates around sovereignty, there always been like two camps: the yes and the no's, like the blues versus the reds. But at the same time, now it's more nuanced than that. We're pretty much, I don't want to make a joke, but more like in the 50 Shades of Grey kind of thing, there's people who would want to say yes, but at the same time, they don't trust people anymore. Not just the Parti Québécois, but the entire political class entirely. And they saw what's happening in Quebec economically, and they don't trust the government, even though independence will give us more freedom in many aspects, but at the same time, more responsibilities. And since the government of Quebec, even Ottawa has its own problems, they have too many more bureaucrats. They have taxes too much, the multiculturalism, the wokeness and stuff. I'm all against it, and most Quebecers. But at the same time, the Quebec government has got its own problem in terms of ultra centralizations. The state have an answer for everything and needs to put their hand on pretty much everything, from electricity production to the selling of alcohol and selling of marijuana, and the daycare of our youth and our elderly people. And many times it's monopolies. It's not like a liberalized market. So for many of them, it's like, okay, if we separate, even though we'll be free, but at the same time, will it be the freedom for the Quebec government to do now everything they want because Grandpa Federal is no longer there to stop them, or it will be a real freedom from the Quebec people itself? And that's the real question, I think. And there's a huge question mark for many people that are not really sure, because they think pretty much we'll be jailed with our own jailers in many cases in terms of government, in terms of governance, if we became independent. Of course, at the same time, if I take an argument from my great friend, economist Vincent Gelozo, which is a senior economist at the Montreal Economic Institute, and is also economy professor at George Mason University in Virginia, said that he's also a sovereignist, but at the same time, one of his great argument is that because of independence, because of the new weight of responsibilities that the government of Quebec will have to do in terms of the budget, because of the part of this debt that will inherit from Canada because of its independence, the new programs, the new the frontier, the army, and all the foreign relation and everything. Even the most centralized or left-leaning centralized government in place will have no choice but to cut deeply, Javier Milei style, chainsaw Afuera kind of style cuts to maintain the government in of itself for not it to collapse, pretty much. So the independence could force massive cut and going back to a more center in terms of governance, less centralization, more decentralization, more private sector, more liberalized economy. So that's the bet. Some people trust it, some don't, some are in between. So yeah, that's pretty complicated.
I want to hear your thought on Alberta separatism, and as well like the possible impact that this movement can have on Quebec.
Well, I'm going to repeat a little bit what I said in French, but we see that the separatist movement in Quebec and in Alberta goes up when we have a centralist party in Ottawa. And that's the problem right now with the federal Liberals. Every time you have a Liberal government in Ottawa, and especially when they're very close to the NDP, they're both centralist parties that are feeding the separatist movement in Quebec and in Alberta. The best way to make sure we have a united Canada is to decentralize, is to listen to people like Danielle Smith, Alberta's premier, and the Quebec Conservatives, and it's to have a very decentralist agenda for our provinces and our regions.
Do you think that Quebec should prepare for potential impacts stemming from Alberta separation, because we have a lot of social program and we need the equalization money in order to pay those programs, even though Alberta is not separating, there will be an impact because they will have a leverage to deal with the equalization payment. Do you think Quebec should prepare themselves?
Yes, but at the same time, I mean, everything could happen pretty much. It could be the referendum could go majorly yes or majorly no. At both times, I think it could give some leverage to Danielle Smith to get some concession from Ottawa, depending on what's happening with the pipeline, maybe like more sovereignty laws and no pushback from certain federal programs, perhaps. But yeah, I think it's the best thing to do for Quebec. But at the same time, I don't think we have our eyes on what's in front of us right now. We are too occupied with what's happening with our own elections. We have what many call us the dome around our own province sometimes, except when Ottawa is speaking to us or to Trump, mostly news. The rest seems to be pretty much irrelevant to our own mainstream media. So even the Quebec people, except those who inform themselves inside other like alternative media or podcasts like mine or media like yours, they don't get the full picture, and that's such a shame. The best idea should probably prepare, but at the same time, there's like a huge amount of pretty much unknown that's in front of us. So we can prepare for the worst or the best, but at the same time, pretty much everything could happen. So yeah.
At Rebel News, we are following closely what is happening in Alberta with this new referendum on the separation. If you want to follow our report, you can go on our special website that is independentreports.com. Thanks for supporting our journalism. Thanks for making a donation. And don't forget to follow all of our reports. Thanks.